Well, the first thing is my job and election administrators across the state is really to instill confidence in the voters. So the first thing that runs through my mind is realize that Washington State works hard every day to make sure that we're not victims of cybersecurity attacks, and that we've really been looking at this issue for close to 20 years. As soon as we started putting election night results up on the internet, we realized that we had to be very careful how we proceed. So the first thing I want people to know is that when you hear about the Russian hacking attacks in 2016 that happened to Washington, we were one of the ones that they didn't get into our system.
But they tried.
They tried. So I liken it to your house. It's like a burglar going around and trying to open your windows or open the doors, but not being able to get in because they were locked. And that's really what we saw. We were aware of it in 2016 because we've been doing this a long time, so we know what normal patterns look like on our server activity, for example, and we have people monitoring that all the time. And we saw some activity that was suspicious. We saw some IP addresses that just did things that were out of the norm. So we blocked those and didn't let them come into our system at all. And turns out, we found out about a year later from Homeland Security that in fact, those were some of the IP addresses that were identified with Russian hacking. So it was certainly, the attempts were made on our state, and I'm very proud and happy to tell people that our security measures were good. But with that said, the other challenge with cybersecurity is you don't want to wave that red flag, and none of us can ever get too, kind of cocky to think that we're impenetrable, because it really is the environment where they're trying 24/7 every single day of the week, every day of the year, to get in thousands of times, and they only have to get it right once, and we have to get it right every single time. So that's what we work to.
And they feel emboldened by 2016, likely.
Yes.
So given that and the attempt, what has been done since that date to now? We have critical elections coming up at the end of this year. We have an election today. What are you doing on your end to make sure that the system is safer?
Well, the first thing, and I probably should go back to that first answer, when I talk about them trying to get into our system, it was the voter registration side, so more the data, which is important to secure as well. The tabulation side, where we're counting ballots and really determining the winners and losers, that is not attached to the internet in any county in our state, let alone across the country. That's a pretty standard practice. So when we were talking about Russian hacking, it really was to the data side, at least in 16. So what we've been doing since then, the first big thing that happened in 2016 was elections were identified by Homeland Security as critical infrastructure. And what that means to all of us is that now we're kind of looked at by the federal government in the same way the power grid is, or water systems, that these are vulnerable to attack and have to be protected. What that means for Washington State is now we have access to a lot more resources than we had in 2016. So we can really augment what we were already doing with Homeland Security. For example, they can do some testing of our system where they're trying to get in, and they're doing some tests to see how secure our system is, not only the electronic security, but physical security. How are we protecting the sites that have these servers, that type of thing. So we work very closely with them on that type of thing. The second tier is training. We're making sure that the counties, who are also, partners in this process, know to do things like not open an attachment in an email, because it could be something that affects your system. So we'll be doing some training over the course of this year for those election officials across the state. And then finally, it's really about the information that Homeland Security and a lot of agencies related to them can share with us, and we can share with them. So when we find an IP address that's doing some activity that looks abnormal, we can report it to Homeland Security, and then they can kind of log that, work with the FBI or other groups that they need to see if there's any kind of national thread there too. So, it's definitely much more powerful than I think it was in 16, and we're going to continue to just beef everything up and try to make sure our systems are secure.
Did the state add additional resources? Well, it sounds like a lot of the additional help might be from the federal side.
Right now, it is predominantly
staffers, or did the state do anything to?
Well, we work closely. My IT staff in the Secretary of State's office has been working very closely with the state IT staff. So you have the Chief Information Officer who works for the governor and really oversees all the agencies in state government. They're kind of one of our partners too. So again, we're just kind of helping each other work on these issues. We are working with the federal government to try to get money to beef up even more our cybersecurity infrastructure, and certainly here in the state. But you know, as is always a story, there's not enough money to go around. So we're going to keep beating that drum, and it's a real risk, and it's really important that our state is doing the right things. And so right now I feel like we have the resources to do what we need to do, and we're going to continue to look and see what's available and make sure that our system's secure.
2 more quick questions. Do you think the current administration is doing enough? Is Homeland Security currently doing enough?
Well, I can't really talk to the administration because I don't really spend a lot of time working with them, but our experience with Homeland is getting much better than it was when we first started. Back in 2016 when we started working with them and we had identified a few threats, I don't think they really understood the transparent nature of elections. They're used to dealing with other entities, and like the power grid. And we had to kind of explain to them that while in those instances you don't share information, you have to in our world. And a great example was what happened at a hearing in 2017 where a person from Homeland Security told Congress that 21 states have been hacked. Well, that was the first time any of the states had heard that, or at least had been attempted to be hacked. And so we, of course, picked up the phone and said, which 20? Which 21? Are we one of them? And they couldn't tell us. And it took about 4 months for Homeland to be able to tell us, let alone the media. And in that time, we kept trying to explain to them, you're going to have to explain it to the American people. And they didn't get it. I think they do now. I think they now understand. And that's part of the challenge that we're facing even this week. I'm headed to Washington, D.C. on Friday to attend a briefing on cybersecurity. And it's a secure facility. It'll be a secure briefing. And we're going to really find out some of those threats. And we won't be able to share a lot of that information with anyone. Even I won't be able to share it with many of my staff members because we have to have security clearances to get it. So that's what's really a challenge, is how do you balance out that transparency that instills confidence so that you believe our system's secure, but still keep the system secure so that we don't have the threats like Russian hacking, or for that matter, anyone hacking into our system. And so it's going to be a new thing we have to balance.
Knowing what you know now, what you've learned in the last year plus, are you comfortable with the current state of affairs with the system? Where do you see room for improvement?
I think that everything related to cybersecurity is just an ongoing effort, and it changes daily. The attacks change daily. The people that are trying to do this work are criminals, and they are going to do whatever it takes to be successful and get into systems. And I don't think there's anyone in this country who is doing anything online that isn't vulnerable. I mean, we're all vulnerable to somebody using ransomware or malware into our own computer system. So I think that the profile of what we do is higher. I think that as all of these interviews have happened, I'm getting questions about, what are you doing? As if this is brand new to us. Like I said, we've been looking at cybersecurity as a really high priority issue since the late 1990s. And really trying to stay one step ahead of those threats. Probably 2.5 years ago, we hosted a Secretaries of State meeting at Microsoft, and we got to go to their cybersecurity site and really see what they undergo every day, and just the millions of attacks that are hitting their systems. And it really put into perspective how the odds are stacked in the favor of the hackers. So we're going to just keep those partnerships with companies like Microsoft and Department of Homeland Security and FBI, and we're going to just keep trying to stay ahead of them and instill that confidence. And I think it's really about working together. And I feel like, to answer your question directly, I'm proud of what we've built, but I also know that it's a daily effort, and we will continue to do it to make sure that this election today, the elections this fall, the elections in 2020, every single one of them is secure and people have confidence.